they were like, oh, well, she's beautiful, but what is she? She's not white enough. She's not black enough. And she definitely doesn't look Latina because it didn't look like Eva Longoria.
Hi, I'm Grasie Mercedes, and welcome back to Not Blank Enough, a podcast about everyday insecurities and triumphs. Today, I'm talking with mom, entrepreneur, and founder of MAED, Denise Vasi. We talked about her upbringing in a diverse Brooklyn neighborhood, living on her own at age 15, identity within the Latinx and Black communities, and the importance of self-care. All this and more in this episode we titled, Not Selfish Enough. Well, hi, Denise, and welcome to Not Blank Enough. I'm so excited to talk to you. We met a million years ago at a fashion show, right? Is that right? I was trying to think of how I originally met you. I mean, we got closer once we were both in Los Angeles, but it was like way back in the day when you were on All My Children, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And Damien was on TRL, and we were doing fashion shows before blogging, before any of that craziness.
Yep. Mm-hmm. G-Star, yeah. It was a G-Star fashion show, and you were so nice. I remember talking to you, and I was a huge fan of All My Children because my mom always listened to it. Watched it growing up. So that was like my show. So I remember when I saw it, I was like, oh, she's on All My Children. Oh my God, I did not know that. Mind you, I was like, this couple is the cutest couple ever. And I just loved how much, like, how attentive he was to you. And I was like, ooh, I like them.
So tell me a little bit about your upbringings and your beginnings. I know you're also from New York like I am. Mm-hmm. You're also a Latina, but let's get into it.
So born and raised Brooklyn girl. Mm-hmm. All the way down by the beach in a very kind of mixed area, kind of right smack in the middle between like a white Russian Jewish neighborhood and Hispanic Black neighborhood. And I come from a very, very mixed family. Mm-hmm. I'm Puerto Rican, Dominican, and Greek. Wow. So at home, we speak lots of Spanglish with injected Greek words. So my Spanish is not great.
Mine either.
And, you know, my mom is like, I should whip you because we all speak great Spanish, but you. And the problem really was that my grandparents met in English school. And my grandmother came from Puerto Rico and my grandfather came from Greece. And I love their love story because it's what I based my whole like love journey on. And if I don't ever find that, I'm never like going to do this love thing. They met in English school, and my grandfather worked at a restaurant, and the busboys were Mexican, and they helped him learn Spanish so that he could kick it to my grandmother.
Aww.
When they formed their family, he learned Spanish, and then she learned Greek. And so what happened by the time that got down to me, my mom, her two sisters, was I'd go to school and I'd say something like, you know, pass my handbag. Mm-hmm. And I'd say pass my in Spanish and then handbag in Greek. So people were like, that's not how you speak Spanish. Right. And I didn't realize it. Like for me, we always say chanda at home, which is how you say in Greek, not pulsa. So then I'd go home and my parents would be like, you know, my mom would be like, oh, well, that's because that's a Greek word. And so it completely stunted my Spanish. So it's terrible, but my husband does say that like when we're in Spanish speaking countries and about like day 3, it kicks in and I'm able to like, help us get around.
Yeah. I'm exactly the same way. Similar, but not really. Like my mom just didn't really teach me Spanish because she was taught not to teach me Spanish because like back then it was like, she should speak English. She shouldn't have an accent. And then my stepfather, since I was a kid, is Italian-American white guy. So we never spoke Spanish at home. So all the Spanish I was getting was like from my grandmother speaking to me in Spanish, and I would answer her in English.
Her back in English, yes. Right. It's so funny. My stepdad is American-Italian also. He didn't come into my life till much later. I was 12, but I didn't know that about us.
Yeah, I know. We have a very similar upbringing past. Weird. So then how was school for you? Like what kind of kid were you in school?
I was a nerd. I loved school. Mm-hmm. I still consider myself a big research whore. Like I just go down the holes of like, I need to know everything about that. Like I get fixated in one thing. And like, I go down those holes, which kind of was what led me into the pivot from acting into, you know, launching my site. But I've always been somebody who was like, how do I, and this is really because of my mom. I love you, Mom. with all the good and the bad. But, you know, I'd come home with a 95 and she'd be like, okay, that's great. But there was extra credit, and how could have you got 100 and you could have got a 105? That has definitely trickled into my life and my battle with perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
There's that. But in school, I was definitely like, you know, how do I get my A's, and a girl who liked to study. And that lasted until probably high school.
Yeah.
When I was 15, I started modeling.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, when I was 12, I started modeling. When I was 15, I started traveling for modeling.
Oh, wow.
So I started to like go to other countries and travel on my own. Shortly after that, I moved out of my parents' house because I thought I was grown. And gosh, if I could go back.
How old
I
were
would.
you? 15?
Yeah, right before my
Oh,
16th
wow.
birthday.
Wow.
Yeah, right after my 16th birthday. And, you know, you think you're grown and you're like, oh, I could do this.
Mm-hmm. And then what happened?
I mean, I did it. I'll never forget being 25, going to visit my mom, and I was getting on a plane to go somewhere, and we were like sitting on, you know, a stoop.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, do you have cash on you? And I was like, no, Mom, like I have my like ATM card. Who carries cash? And she was like, you gotta have cash, you know, you gotta have cash wherever you go, right? My husband still does this to me.
Right.
And like she gave me a little bit of cash, and she goes, I think you're gonna be okay. And I was like, I think so. I've been on my own for 10 years now, and I've, you know, I'm alive, and
Right.
I've thankfully been successful in my life and a bunch of different arenas, and have been able to continuously like pivot and, you know, reshape my career as
Mm-hmm.
it seemed fit, as I learned more about like who I was versus like who they wanted me to be.
Mm-hmm.
And as I learned more about what I really cared about and who, you know, what I wanted to stand for and why I wanted to do the things I was doing.
And when you were on your own from 15 on, were you in New York or you were just traveling
You know,
everywhere? In New
in New
York.
York, but I was moving around for work a lot,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes within the States, sometimes out of the country.
Yeah.
But I was always based in New York.
And what was that like? I mean, like day to day, were there any feelings then of not blank enough? And if so, what was that blank?
Well, you know, it's funny because when you told me that you were launching this, I was like, okay, if she ever asks me, I know exactly what I'm going to talk about, because I know that you know this feeling
Yeah.
of not fitting in racially or culturally, or you don't even know ethnically,
Mm-hmm.
like you're like so kind of lost in what this box that people want to put you in, and whether or not you really feel like you want to be put in a box. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, I always say like, I was very fortunate. I didn't have it at school. My neighborhood was very mixed. Whatever people said, it never got to me. You know, if they were saying chip behind my back, it didn't get to me. I was treated really well amongst my peers, and my friends are very mixed, and my family is super mixed.
Right.
But my dad, who wasn't really around past 6 months daily, and then he was in and out for the next couple of years till I was about 6 maybe. And I was like, this isn't really working. So I think we're going to have to cut this off.
Yeah.
What he had explained to my mom was, I'm Dominican and I'm not Black. And that is something that you might know about because it's culturally ingrained in Dominican people. And my mom only knows, or only knew at the time, what her partner was telling her,
right?
You know? And according to him, still today, unfortunately, many Dominicans is this like, you know, well, we have our own language, we have our own food. And then you mix that with the fact of like within the Hispanic or Latinx, there's so many different terminologies these days. What do we say? Right. There was no Afro-Latina when we were growing up.
No.
That. So you really didn't fit into anything. People wanted to make you fit into things, but you were like, I don't know. I was little. I'm just me. You know, then you get into all the colorism in the Hispanic and Latin community. So my mom understood that, but I didn't really see it as a child in school. And it wasn't until I started modeling and until I started spending my time around adults where I realized like, why do people have to figure out what I am?
Right.
So when I was I started, you know, going to the city a lot on the train with my mom, and people used to be like, oh, is she wearing contacts? Oh, and I'd be like, what are contacts? And now, I mean, there's a gazillion girls who look like me.
Yeah.
But at the time in my neighborhood where we were, you didn't see brown girls with blue or green eyes.
Yeah.
So people assume that my mom was putting contact lenses in our kids' eyes, which is crazy now that I'm a mom, like to think that people would say, even entertain a thought like that.
Right.
And then I started modeling. And at first I remember, I did everything. I was like, oh, I want to do gymnastics. Oh, I want to do ballet. Oh, I want to. And we had a family friend who said, you should really get into modeling. And he kept on and he kept on. And he said, I'll help. I'll send the pictures. I'll do, organize things. And so they sent my photos out to 4 different places. The first 2 big places I met with were Wilhelmina and Ford and Elite. I met with Elite too. And they were like, oh, well, she's beautiful, but what is she?
Oh,
she's not like, and at the time, the boards, the modeling boards were like blonde, blue eyes, blonde, blue eyes, blonde, blue eyes. You had 1 or 2 even Caucasian brunettes. And then you had like 1 black girl. And maybe you had an Asian girl, but she was kind of Euro Asian, like white Asian. So they're like, she's not white enough. She's not black enough. And she definitely doesn't look Latina because it didn't look like Eva Longoria.
Right. Right.
And that was the first time I realized like, oh, I'm this middle person and people want me to do this thing called modeling, right? I didn't really know. It's like, oh, that's how people get in magazines. But they don't really know how to put me, aka market me. So Elite and Wilhelmina passed and Ford called. My mom was so excited because, at the time it was like where all the big girls were. And she's like Eileen Ford and she was just on Oprah. And by the time the daughter Katie and I was like, okay, cool. I get to miss school and have a beeper when nobody, okay, cool,
Yeah.
And then that was the beginning of me really figuring out that like, okay, who am I going to be? Who am I going to portray? How code switching, but we didn't have code switching then, right?
We didn't have those words.
Right. So it was, if they were looking for a black girl, then I'd make sure I'd straighten my hair. If they were looking for somebody who was like mixed ambiguous started happening. So I'd pull my hair down. My eyes look a little bit more like almond shape. Like I started to figure out that there were ways that I could try and go in and book a job by being what they were looking to cast.
So you're constantly kind of adjusting yourself to fit the mold of what they were looking for
a long time.
And in that, what was that blank then for you? What were you feeling like?
I mean, there were so many. First of all, I was tiny. I'm 5'7". So at the time it was like, well, I'm not tall enough.
Right.
And that was a big one that affected my career. And eventually when I really started to take modeling seriously, I realized that I didn't have to be tall to do beauty campaigns.
Right.
I was never going to do a Gucci campaign or a major fashion designer because I was never going to walk the runway because I wasn't tall enough. But I could really succeed in commercial makeup, skincare, and hair care campaigns. And that's when I was like, okay, let go of whatever I thought this was. Here's how I need to focus things. And then the idea of being ambiguous became an up, like a plus. So then it was, okay, I'm going to go in big curly hair, make sure I'm showing my eyes and skin and like, not too much makeup, not trying to cover things or trying to change my skin tone.
Embracing that difference.
And really embracing it. And that helped my career and helped me. But for a while it was confusing because I didn't understand why it was so important until I started working and getting on sets and being like, oh, you got to have a white blonde girl. You've got to have a white brown haired girl. You've got to have an Asian girl, but not too Asian. And then you have to have a colored girl.
Some kind of,
Right?
Yeah.
And then I think then we become, and this actually comes back to the light of day during this last summer's BLM movement of being like the card. You're the card. You're the acceptable Black girl, right?
You're acceptable, exactly, but also you're almost like the gateway drug to Blackness. It's like, oh, we can be comfortable around you because you're more like us, which is such a fucked up way of thinking, but it's such a reality. And it's crazy. You're talking. I'm like, this is like we have such a similar life. And so your dad's Dominican, your mom's Puerto Rican and Greek.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So yeah, both of my parents are Dominican. So I grew up with all that shit and the same thing where it's like, you're not Black enough. You're not white enough. You don't look like Latina like they want you to look. And so there's this in between. And I remember when I first moved to Los Angeles for acting, I started going on auditions and I started seeing all these biracial girls who I thought were Dominican and Puerto Rican, and they weren't. They were just African American and white. And they assumed I was that. And then it was just always this like, oh, there's not a lot of Dominicans and Puerto Ricans out here.
Oh, yeah.
And I look the way I look because genetically we are half Black and half white. We do have European and African ancestry and Indian ancestry in us. So it's just such a crazy thing that in our community, they want to erase that part.
Erase it unless you go down and do your own work. And obviously, our generation that's teaching the next generation, hopefully, God willing, won't have, as much of this confusion, because it is very confusing. And then when I started acting, I would only go out for Black characters.
Yeah, same.
And I was like, well, is that okay? Is that who I am? And so because I was raised with my mom and it wasn't my mom's lineage, and she only knew what my, biological father had told her, it wasn't like I grew up knowing that I was Black, because there was no one in my house except for maybe my aunt who would say things like, well, your dad's Black, even though he doesn't want to admit it. And I was like, well, I was confused, because in my mind, like, why wouldn't you ever admit what you are? And then high school came around, and high school was kind of like, oh, but you sound like a white girl. Oh, what does a white girl sound like? I don't know. I have no idea. What does a Black girl sound like? I think in my 20s, it was kind of whatever. I was like partying a lot, and it didn't really, I dated all different kinds of guys. But then when I started to, I don't know what the right word is, get popular or get noticed, and like, the weeklies, the trade papers, I was acting, newspapers, it became, well, why is she dating a white guy? Well, gosh, I don't know. You guys didn't see the Black guy I dated before him, I guess. I don't know. Right. They didn't see the Middle Eastern guy I dated in between, the Muslim guy I dated here. I mean, I dated everything, but it was always about, whenever I was dating a white guy, why was I dating a white guy? And I was so confused by that in my 20s. And then when I became a mom, and especially this year, me and my husband, who is white, and my husband, who is, such a prominent person in telling African-American Black cultural stories.
He's a director, just for the audience.
He's a director, and he's just like a wealth of knowledge and really knows a lot about everything. And he's, found a lot of success, and also is very interested in helping propel those stories. Even the movie that he's editing right now is, he chose a Black female as his lead. It was, written differently. And he really was, when we met 11 years ago or 10 years ago, was like, right, but that like DR was a drop-off point for slaves.
Yeah.
And so
that's our roots.
Roots are of slaves. And I was like, well, I don't remember that lesson in school, because when are they ever talking about DR in school, right?
Never.
It's like never.
No.
And my parents didn't tell me that. So I was like, wow, mind blown. This past summer with BLM, and now having a 5-year-old, realizing like how important it is for her to really understand that she has roots in all these different places, so that she can go out and decide how she wants to identify, so that she is not put in a place like I was of trying to figure it out. Because when I express my anger or passion for BLM and movements of such, some of it is because I've been treated one way, because I've definitely been places where I've been called things. Most of it is because I don't think anybody should be treated or mishandled in any which way, because definitely not because of their skin tone. But part of me is always like, can I say we? Can I not say we? If all of a sudden I'm saying we, do people think like I'm jumping on some bandwagon? It's hard for people because they don't they don't know the struggle or the journey, better, I should say. It's been more of a journey than a struggle, but the journey that I've been on to get here and figure it out.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have both parents at home. My biological father was not at home.
Mm-hmm.
And then, my stepfather came around much later, but it's been a journey to understand who I am. And it's not my mom's fault because she only knows what she was told and what that side of the family was adamant about. I mean,
Right.
my dad had, I think, 12 brothers and sisters,
Oh,
or
wow.
there were 12 altogether.
Yeah.
And, they all told the same story.
Yeah. And your mom is, I'm assuming, light skinned then, right? Like a white Latina.
She looks like J-Lo. Yeah.
Oh, wow,
like
easy.
She's like, like gold skin, honey hair, honey colored brown eyes.
Yeah.
And she definitely knows colorism in her own respect about being a Latina, right? Because she's a fair skinned Latina. And it's just, there's so much of it. It's so
there's so many. It's so layered and so deeply rooted in anti-Blackness and accepting there is a difference between ethnicity and race, and that we can be racially Black, but still be ethnically Dominican, Puerto Rican, whatever we are. People are starting to get it, but it's still, in the 12 years I've been acting, I went out for a Dominican role for the first time 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
Because I'm always being just pulled in for either Black or just ethnically, whatever, because they don't see they as in Hollywood, the media.
I'm like, wow, they're writing Dominican roles now.
Exactly. Okay. And it's because it's a Dominican creator, because, but it's just, they don't understand that Latin people don't all look one way. We look literally every way. We can be as white, as Black as night. Like, it's just like, we can just be anything. And so I think people are starting to understand that, but before more recent times, it's like, no, if you don't look like J-Lo or Salma or Penelope or one of these others, you're not Latina, or you're not,
you're not Latina at all.
No.
But then again, like, we didn't have Afro Latina. We didn't
have that word.
I'm still trying to understand, when I write something, am I writing Latinx or Hispanic, and what is appropriate and what isn't?
I can give you a quick lesson on that.
Let's go.
Just because I've been asked this a million times. Hispanic and Latino, let's just say Latino. Let's make the X a different lesson. Okay. But Hispanic versus Latino really overlaps a ton, right? The only difference is Latino means you come from a Latin American country. Hispanic means you come from a Spanish-speaking country. So the only places those like kind of overlap or don't overlap is Brazil is considered, you can be Latino from Brazil because you're in Latin America, but you're not Hispanic because you speak Portuguese. And then on the flip side, if you're from Spain, you're Hispanic because you're from a Spanish-speaking country, but you're not Latino because you're not from Latin America. So those are the two only countries where it really matters. But
I'm so confused because my grandmother is Puerto Rican via Spain.
Well,
she's her parents are from Spain.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean?
But she's both. And all our ancestry is from Spain too. It's like, we are from Spain. We are from Africa. We are also natives. So there's a great video I will link in the show notes so people can see and see the explanation of this. But Hispanic is being less used these days.
Right.
Because because the politics behind that is Hispanic equals Spain equals colonialism equals being colonized. So trying to move away from the idea of us being these colonized people. And that's why people prefer Latino. Now, Latino versus Latinx.
This is where I get confused.
That is more of a generational, I feel like, opposition, where older people don't want to incorporate the X. The X is just supposed to be more inclusive. So it includes people who don't identify as a man or a woman, so non-binary. It also makes, because everything in Spanish language is male.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about a group of people, they're Latinos. So Latinx is like, well, no, that group of people are not all men. There are women in that group of people. So let's include everybody and use Latinx, which is why I'm okay with Latinx. At first, I was
love it. I'm okay with it now too.
I was like, what does this mean? I don't understand. But a lot of people don't want to let go of the, first of all, the purity of the language. And second of all, it's confusing and not everyone knows the background. And, so we're evolving, we're all changing. And Afro Latinx, that's new too. And, adding that afro in the beginning, and people were like, what does that mean? I mean, I literally had someone say, does that mean because you have an afro? And I was like, no,
No, honey,
that's not what
stop.
I mean.
Oh,
So
oh
yeah,
no, baby girl.
it's very
Oh, no.
confusing. People are confused. I try to educate as I can, but I get it. It's a very complicated thing.
It is very complicated, and even more complicated when you are the subject
Exactly.
of it all,
Like,
and you're trying. I mean, thank you for that
of course.
lesson.
Of course.
Because I was like, wait, why are we adding an X now?
Yeah.
Now I'm not Latina, I'm Latinx.
But also I want people to understand that you can use both. Like I say I'm Latina, I don't say I'm Latinx. But if I'm referring to a group, I say we are Latinx. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I get it now. And I love it. I'm all about let's get rid of that.
And like you, like I didn't know I was Black until college when my roommate, who's still my best friend, who's African American Black, she was like, no, but you're Black. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm Dominican. Because that's all I was taught. Like you're Dominican.
All, yes, I love you because there's so much guilt then you carry.
So much guilt.
Carry this guilt around for so long. And then it becomes like, again, like I go back to saying things because I was just making a video last week for this. I'm doing this charity raise for BLM for Black History Month and using or charities that are going out and fighting, the BLM movement. And I was like, oh, I said we. Or is that going to cause a uproar?
No, you're allowed to say
oh, now all of a sudden you're Black, and I'm like. It's not that all of a sudden I'm Black, but yes, there was a journey of figuring that out.
Yeah, I only became comfortable with saying it in the last probably 5 to 10 years because it's twofold. Part of me was like feeling, because I've had this is the thing in your life, you have people treat you a certain way because of it. So I had Black girls be like, no, you're not Black because you're Dominican. And I've had Dominican people be like, no, you're not really Latina because you don't speak Spanish or you don't do this or you don't do that. So then you're like, well, where do I fit? Like, who am I? What am I? And I've more recently become comfortable with saying, yes, I am Black. But I also think there's a difference between saying I'm Black and saying I'm African American. I wouldn't say I'm African American. I don't feel like I'm African American. I feel like I'm Dominican American, but I am racially Black. But there is a part of me that's like, am I allowed to say that I'm Black? Am I allowed to say that I'm this? Am I allowed to say that I'm that? It's like, no, obviously I am. And the world sees me as such. But it also feels like you're denying this other part of you, this like Latina part of you, this Dominican part of you. But at the end of the day, we're all these things.
There's guilt literally on both sides. And I've actually not have had this conversation with anybody. And so I feel like I'm in a therapy session right now because besides my husband, where we really went deep and like pulled the map out for my 5-year-old. So my 5-year-old goes, I'm gold.
Aww.
Because I have Black blood and I have white blood and I love it. And I think it's, it's super important for parents these days, not only parents of children of color, but especially of white parents, to educate their kids and let them understand and figure out and know what happens when somebody's mixed. Mm-hmm. Like, remember when mulatto was a word? Oh, you're mulatto.
Yeah.
Like, oh, but that means half Black, half white. And I'm like, but I'm also Spanish, right? Or Latin or Hispanic. So where does it, and it's so, it's so confusing, so many layers. And it's so important right now for me just to really educate my kids, especially my girl, on all these different places that she's from, so she can go out prepared to tell people what she is versus sitting back and trying to figure out, where do I fit in because people are trying to make me be one or the other or pick.
Right. Make you pick and be in a box.
Because that was a big thing for me too with the Puerto Rican Dominican. Are you a plátano or are you a Goya bean? I'm like, who talks like this?
I am both. Leave me alone.
I am both. I'll take them both all day long together.
Seriously.
I'm together.
So now as an adult, tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days and what your blank is today.
Today my blank is I'm not on time, but I'm not on time enough. Let's see. I think there's pieces of it that are still very relevant of what we were just kind of discussing. And today I was acting I did the acting thing for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I was on a TV show called Single Ladies.
Mm-hmm.
That was really fun. I did that after all my children. And then I got pregnant with my first child. Whenever I say got pregnant, I always feel like that sounds crazy. I was married and then had a baby. I'm like, I got pregnant.
I got knocked up.
I got knocked up. My parents, my Latinx parents would kill me. No. And realized that I didn't want to be on set for 17 hours a day trying to raise my kid. And because I didn't come from, I came from a family where like my tia would help me, my aunties would be there, not a family who had, outside help come in. I really did not know how to like pick up a phone and call a nanny. Like my girlfriends were like, oh, you just call a nanny. And I was like,
this is
okay.
Come on.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, hello. Like, who are you? I don't know. So I was like, I've got to be with my kids. Made the pivot very organically through social media, was sharing kind of like everything that I did in my life and the way I kind of lived and eat and exercise and all my kind of wellness and skincare and self-care tips. So through that, found a career pivot and launched a site called MAED, where we focus on clean beauty, intentional parenting, and, self-care, wellness. I think the biggest blank that I've been in the last couple of years was realizing I wasn't selfish enough.
I like that.
Because it really took me becoming a mom to realize how much an investment relationships were, and how much I needed to give myself and how much myself I was giving away to relationships that weren't necessarily like giving back.
Yeah.
My first year of being a mom, I had to do everything and I had to be this way. And, my husband couldn't change a diaper and and I was burnt out because, you can't live like that. And so I really had to step back and say, I need to take better care of myself. And in taking better care of myself, I will be able to take better care of my family.
All right.
But I think as women, we're somehow along the lines programmed that we have to do it all and that we can do it all. And that there's, this idea of balance,
Yeah.
This year, I think we're throwing this idea out. But the years before 2020, like 2019 and between 2015 and 2019, I'd go in panels and how do you balance it all? And I'm like, well, I don't know if I'd call it balance. I mean, I have to figure out how to prioritize my time and make time for me and say no a lot. Learning to say no was a big thing.
Especially for women. I feel like it's really hard for us to say no.
Yeah, because we think that we have to be everything to everyone. We have to make the food. We have to support the emotional support. We have to, carry it. And then we want to work and then we want to contribute and then we want to be, And so it took me a big aha moment to realize that self-care wasn't selfish and that I've spent a lot of my life not being selfish enough in the most, and I say selfish in a positive way and saying I really don't have time to do that, and maybe we can revisit the conversation another day or, the activity another time, but I can't be at every place at every moment and not drive myself crazy.
Yep.
And I have to learn how I'm going to say no so that I can take time for me. How do I tell my partner, I need you to show up more. I need you to show up here. I need you to do this so that I can step away so that I can have time to, follow my passions or take a shower or, scroll Instagram. I mean, it could be anything. Self-care self-care doesn't look the same for everybody. And it doesn't even look the same every day. Sometimes I just want to go in a corner and aimlessly scroll on Instagram for 30 minutes because I'm not really my mind is just decompressing.
Yeah.
And it's why I'm such a big advocate now for self-care, because for so long I was just, trying to be everything for everyone, including friendships that, I really felt like, wow, I'm there with bells and whistles. You need something, I'm there. I got you. No matter what time of the day, I'm on the phone, I'm at your house, I've got a meal, I've organized, I've been there. I've flown cross country. And then one day I woke up and I was like, yeah, well, I just went through this period. Who was really there for me? Who really showed up for me, and realized that I needed to cut some ties and, tighten up the circle.
I love that because, well, first of all, no one's really touched on this before, I don't think, but that line, especially where you said like self-care isn't selfish, because I do think a lot of times, especially as women, we feel guilty, this whole thing of, and I think also as women of color, especially, we feel like go, 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 go. We constantly have to be hustling. Hustle hard, constantly working for the greatness. And so I love not selfish enough. And I think that's a great lesson for our audience to hear. And then to complement that, you have an amazing website that they can, figure out wellness and self-care ways. I love all your content, especially the stuff like you made like almond milk one day, like from scratch. And I was like, this woman has 2 kids and her own business and she's making almond milk from scratch. Like, how do you do it?
I definitely prioritize my days, and I definitely make sure that I schedule things out, and I schedule my me time the exact way I schedule a meeting.
I love that.
That's what I think is key. And everybody knows it goes on the family schedule, so that don't bother me. Do not bother me.
It's so important, especially now.
Oh, now more than ever. I mean, This has been just a complete other level of pressure as women and as moms to just be a teacher now on top of things. That's why this month we launched a self-care challenge, 30 days of self-care, and just really advocating for women to make sure to step into being comfortable saying no and taking back time and tightening the circle and saying, I want to have quality people. It's not about quantity. I don't need to be the most popular mom at school. I have my 2 or 3 girlfriends. They're there for me. I'm there for them. And that is, at the end of the day, all that you need. You're right. It's just kind of programmed in us to be everybody's cheerleader, show up for everybody, and put ourselves last.
Well, I love ending on that note. And thank you so much for being on Not Blank Enough. This was so lovely. Learned new things about you today. Learned that our lives are even more parallel than I thought.
I mean, crazy.
We're basically the same person. And we're both from Brooklyn. And we're both.
I know.
It's crazy.
Well, so good to see you. You look incredible. So proud of you.
Thank you. I love your curls. I love that you're wearing your hair curly. All right. Love you, Denise. Bye.
Love you, sweetheart. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Not Blank Enough with me, Grasie Mercedes. You can find out more about today's guest in the show notes. Please subscribe to Not Blank Enough wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Instagram at Not Blank Enough Pod. Also, if you like what you hear, please consider a rate and review. Our show today was executive produced by Grasie Mercedes and Dave Hill, and produced by Douglas Sarine and Colleen Beasley. Not Blank Enough is a Gumption Pictures production.